Hi guys, welcome to the first code film for this year. If you haven't watched the year 4 address, which we listed our objectives for this year, I'll admonish you that please do watch that film so that you all orient yourself as to what to expect this year with code films. The link should also be showing on your screen as it stands now. So that's for those that are new and for those that haven't yet watched the year 4 address. For those of us that have always been subscribers of cool films, I'll say for this year, we are looking at real world solutions. That's one of our main objectives for this year. And what we want to do is that we want to implement or build solutions that are out there in the real world. And the reason for doing that is for us to be able to know which um, aspect of the programming or which features of the programming or which um, knowledge of programming is required to implement such um, solutions. And the first of such we want to look at is the file scanning server. I'm saying file scanning because the extension is a feature which is part of the scanning server. Later on, you could also be scanning for viruses. That's as and when the product is being developed. But as it stands now, the server only scans for extensions. And this sort of solution exists on the Gmail platform. If you go to Gmail, for instance, sorry, all right, let's check, let's connect the internet. If you go to Gmail, for instance, you realize that there are times that when you are trying to attach a file and that file is not recognized by Gmail, Gmail goes ahead to tell you that you can't upload this file onto their platform. And the reason is that if you try to upload it onto Gmail, that file has been flagged as illegal or it has been flagged um, as a risk to their platform. Not only to their platform, but it's against business or security rules. So we do not want to, they do not want you to take that risk or they do not want to put their servers and all their infrastructure at such a risk. So to prevent such a thing from happening, they've been able to implement a solution whereby any attachment that is made to the file, that's made to the a mail that being sent on their platform, they do not permit it to be, or they make you aware, and then they make sure that you cannot send such a solution, a file. So here's my Gmail, and I'm trying to compose a new mail. This is actually um my account that I'm using, and this account is the account that does full films correspondences. So we proceed to attach a file. Let's attach an executable file. You realize that Gmail actually come and tell you that you cannot attach this file, blocked for security reasons. And if you click on help, it'll tell you the reasons as to why they are not going to allow you to send such a file. So this solution that you are seeing here is what we also want to implement here at Code Films. And so they go ahead that this may spread viruses and a whole lot of reasons. So yeah, you can read more and then you get to know what all this entails. Right. So we realize that it says block for security reasons, which means that we cannot send the file. Right. So we too as engineers here, we also want to try and implement such a similar situation, such a similar solution, sorry. And what we want to do is that we want to establish a client server relationship with that implementation. So we have a client app that in our own space or in our own network, we want to set up a mail service or emailing service such a way that anybody in that organization that wants to send a mail as an organization, we've built a file scanning server, and that file scanning server has an in-memory database. So in that file scanning server, we have listed or we have set up the files that are allowed for attachment and those that are not allowed. So as part of the feature of the scanning server, it scans for extensions. So the client app that we built over here is actually speaking to the file scanning server. So when an end user sits behind the laptop and wants to send the file via mail, the client app is going to scan and see if that file is a file that the organization has set up policies which do not allow it to be sent or it should be sent. And that's because we have built our own client app that helps us to do that. If you take the case for Gmail have set up their own security reasons for not sending that, and it goes on to tell you that um, on this Gmail platform or Gmail does not allow you to file type is blocked in Gmail. So that's their proposition for anybody that wants to use their platform. So this is what we are telling you, or this is what we are making you aware that hey, you can't send files of this type on Gmail. You can try another mail service. You can go ahead and try Yahoo. Probably Yahoo will give you what you want, but if you come to Gmail, Gmail says no. For security reasons, you cannot go ahead and do that. So in our same network or our same body, corporate space, we want to also do the same for our environment. So we've built our client app, we have our file scanning server, and we're in an enterprise network or we're in an enterprise setup. And then this file scanning server is going to scan for all kind of files that will be sent via mail, that's electronic transmission. So in doing that, the client apps have to speak to the file scanning server. So we've built this file scanning server, which is in an in-memory database as compared to a production database, which is standalone. In-memory database will help us with a quick erasure because we do not want to save the files. We just want to scan for the extensions and give a response to the client, and the client knows how to handle the response and interpret the response and give feedback to the user. But if it comes, if but that's just the first case. But if let's say it turns out that this file scanning server has to be open for other users for every other solution or every other organization that wants to do the same, then we have to build or have to release this file scanning server so that everybody can have access to it. So what do I mean? This is our network as code films. We've built our own client app for mails. Another company out there, maybe company XYZ, says that fine, we too also want to set up our own mail client service for reasons known to us. We do not want to go with open ones. We want to go with our own definitions and our own specifications. So they go ahead and then they implement their mail client app, but they do not want to go ahead and write a file scanning server. So we've already built that file scanning server, which is an application. But for them to also enjoy it, we have to expose it as an API so that they can have access to the API. So we will not just send them the application to use, no, but they will have access to the APIs that will make it possible for them to scan their files and build their solutions. So it's not just an application. It's not, first of all, it's not just a server, it's an application. Beside it being an application to the file scanning server to is an API. Aside it being an API, it's also a service. It's a web service. It's a service that is on the internet, that is made available on the internet. And that service is going to help you to scan files. So as it stands now, what Gmail has probably is only tied to the Gmail platform. What if we want to scan for files for reasons known to us? Now Gmail has made their solution closed, so we do not have that solution. So what about Yahoo too? So do they also have that same service? How do I have access to the service? So we build an API for that, and that API is what's going to help us to expose the features that is being promised by the file scanning server. So enough of the talk. Let's just go straight into the demo. So we looked at all this because we want to understand API, services, application, server, and project. And it's always the same thing. It's just like polymorphism, but just as the way the use cases appear to you is how you interpret it or you make inferences for each of them. So as it stands now, we've built a server. So we built a server. The client speaks to the server gives it a response. And this server is working with the feature of an in-memory database. The database is sitting inside the server. It's part of the server. It's not standalone, whereby it's connecting to a database sitting in another location, sending communications over network wires with all the latencies and throughput issues that may exist and bandwidth issues that may exist. Nope. This is an in-memory database. So let's gradually go into the code film and let's appreciate everything that this code film promises to us. So before we even start that, let's first of all look at our objectives again for this year. And not forgetting that our objectives for this year is just for us to be able to build real world solutions as promised here, write real world solutions, and then the real world solutions we want to write, we want to make use of. Some of them are using React Native, JavaScript especially, and core implementations as advanced use cases of software engineering and Java concepts. So our code film has a bit of that, and that bit we'll look at it later on. But now it's just a demonstration. So we want to go ahead and just demo that. So let's go to our IDE. Our servers are already up. And let's first of all launch to the API bit of it. So the file scanning server is on 8089. So this is our file scanning server. This is our mail client app. So when we go to 8089 on localhost, 8089, and we go to Swagger. Where we have our Swagger documentation. Realize that the file scanning server API. This is the API that if or as and when another organization wants to make use of the file scanning server, they go ahead and implement it based on that. So they will consume this service, and that's just for consumption sake. So at that point, you are just consuming the external service. So you are consuming the external service. I'm not saying server because at this point I'm consuming a service. But after consuming the service, if I have my solution up and running, that one is up. I have my client app working. But as it stands, I'm consuming a service. Because I'm consuming the service, I would just read the documentation, then I get to know what it does. But if it turns out that the API that I'm using does not support the file types that I want to list, then I do no longer have to consume the service. It could be that the API hasn't made room for end users to also add file types they don't want to they don't want to be allowed on their network, and that hasn't yet been done by this API. So to make that possible, what we can do is that we can actually make the source code open. So open source. So you go ahead, you clone the source code, or you get a copy of the source code, and with that copy of the source code, you build your own solutions, or you build your own implementation that you like. So if you come over here, whether the file scanning server project or the project is open, it's in a repository and it's open. So you can go ahead and take the source code and build and customize per your needs. So this is the open source code or the source code bit of it, or open source of it, of that understanding. And this is the API bit of it, just for consumption sake. So if you are consuming, just know that these are the file types you are going to be working with. And once you consume, you are going to actually make use of the service. So when we deploy this on the internet, and this is having a public URL, all that it means is that the server is sitting somewhere in Kenya, and then you are just consuming the service. You are just consuming the service. You are just consuming the service. But if you don't want the server to be sitting in Kenya, but you want to have the server on your platform or on your infrastructure, then you want to go with actually having access to the source code. You build your own source code, you get your own executable file, then you go ahead and use it per your needs. But as it stands now, you can't do that with an API because the API is just for external communications. So you want to actually just, so there are cases now where you are going with the open source bit of it. And this is an open source code, or you're actually cloning or having access to the source code to actually do your own work. So you have the API, you also have the open source. I'm trying to produce all this understanding so that um, we know what we're about. So now as a server, this is a server bit of it. So this is a server that is running. And this server is running on 8089. If I deploy this on the internet, and as a developer, I can't have access to this anymore, the source code, because it's over the internet. Unless I go and actually have the executable on my environment, then I can actually go ahead and say that I also have the server on my infrastructure. But as it stands now, the server is not on my infrastructure. It's sitting on another person's infrastructure, just like a website. Amazon, as it stands now, is not sitting on our infrastructure at all. Amazon.com web application is sitting in a different country and it's giving us all this. But if it happens that now Amazon sees that their source code is open, which means that everybody can have a copy of Amazon on their infrastructure for reasons known to them, or every shop owner or every business owner can have their own version of Amazon for their own needs. Then when that happens, we no longer have to, we can actually have access to Amazon on our platform, and that could be done with an open source code of the Amazon. If it's just about Amazon exposing as part of their services to end users to build around it, then that was a different use case, and that one we are just using an API for the communication. But we want to have full access, full control, and have an Amazon on our environment, then we are going the different implementation style. So we've read the documentation as developers, and we built our solution around that. It says that the file scanning server, as it stands now, does not support PDF scanning and JPEG extension scanning. And the file types that are prohibited are also listed here. So this is the list of file types that are prohibited. And we have the list of file types that are not yet supported for scanning. So in this version, it's not yet supported, but in the next version, it could be supported. So we've read that, and then we are ready to test that. So if you go onto our mail client app that we built, as we've explained, that the mail client app is in our corporate or network. We are the ones that have built that mail client app for our own business reasons. So if we go ahead and let's check if it's running here. Right, so that one's running on 8088. So if you go ahead and launch that on 8088, let's go here, 8088, not mail, but rather the index page. We have the mail client app. This is just the compose section of it. We are not logging into it. We are not logging out. We just have the compose section showing to us. So this mail client app is going to speak to our file scanning server, and we are doing that via API call. So we built a mail client app around that solution. All right, so that's it for the technical understanding and the technical orientation around API service, open source, a project, an application, and all that was said earlier in the film. All right, so now what we want to do is that we've looked at the documentation, we've read it, we've consumed the service, and then now we want to go ahead and test it. Just as we saw on Gmail, realize that Gmail blocked it for us. But I want us to look at this also, because now we want to actually go into the file scanning server and understand some one or two points. Because we said that we are building real world solutions. So coming from a programmer perspective, or programmer's thinking, you realize that when it goes ahead and tell you the file types that are blocked, this is actually the list of files that you can't send on Gmail. It's a list. Someone would say, how is it possible that you're going to scan for all extensions? So they have a list of all the files. And on our implementation to also have a list of it. So we are using a list to be able to make this possible. And that's the programming bit of it. Probably we've looked at collections, you've looked at collections, data structures, but you're actually not seeing how it relates or how it's being used. So this is just the first use case that of how it's being used. Here's the list of all the files that is being supported, and that same understanding orients around prohibited files and allowed file types. All right, so let's go to our client app. So this is our client app that will be speaking to our server. So on our server bit 2, before I even go into the before I even go into the structure, that's the project structure. Let's just test this first. Let's actually start attaching files and see how the mail scanning server behaves. Alright, so first you click on the attach, and then you attach some number of files. First, let's attach file types that are allowed. So because you know what is prohibited, if it's not listed here, it is allowed. So we don't see .executable. So .executable is allowed. And then we also don't see text files. Text files too are allowed. So let's attach text files and executable file. And let's keep in mind that the server here, the client app here is speaking to a server. It's speaking to a server. So this client is speaking to the server, but we are not actually seeing it because it's being abstracted from our view. So we have to appreciate that abstraction is taking place. So if we attach executable and text files, realize that we haven't noticed anything. So we're able to attach the files. The file types have been attached, and then we've seen that they have been attached. So this is just the first use case. Because we have obeyed the documentation, we didn't get any response from the server. Alright. But let's go ahead and now attach a file type that is not allowed. So let's pick one first. Let's try and attach a Java file. So if we go ahead and attach a Java file, we are okay with this. We are okay with this. Right, so let's go ahead and attach a Java file. So go and pick a Java file. Let's search for a Java file. Mm, but let's pick one of the source code here. Let's go and copy and paste it. So let's copy the controller and let's paste it in our directory here. Right, so this code films, and we we are technical software engineers. So we attach a file. Let's attach a Java file because we read from the documentation that Java file types are prohibited. So you realize that once you attach a Java file, we have a response, unacceptable file extension.java, and for the file. And this response is coming uh, from our file extension scanning server, because we've done an implementation and then it's telling you that this file type is not allowed. Alright, so that's the first case because the file scanning server is working. Just as we saw for the Gmail solution to as well, but this is a different implementation. And we realize that when we attach a file that is not allowed, the mail client does not even allow you to send the mail at all. It doesn't allow you to do that at all. Alright, so let's attach another file. Let's attach prohibited files, and let's look at our server. So let's go and attach a Java Excel file, and also Java. Let's attach a Java Excel file, and then let's see if we can get a SQL file. Yeah, so let's do that. So for the SQL file, let me see. Let's just do a quick search and see if we have any SQL files sitting somewhere. Right, so we have one. Let's go and pick that file and let's dump it in our viruses. Alright, so we attach three files: SQL, Java, and Excel. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. SQL, Java, Excel. Alright, so if I attach three files that are not allowed, that are prohibited, and we get our response as usual: unacceptable file, unacceptable file, unacceptable file. And then you see the attachment over here. And this is very good because our file scanning server is actually telling you that you can't attach a file. So a user wants to send a mail to his friend on the network, and they are all in the same organization. They are all in the same organization. He sends hello as a subject and he types his mail, but he can't send because these file types are not allowed on the network or um the corporate infrastructure that has been set up. They don't allow these file types. And that's because the file scanning server was built by them and it's being used by them. But we looked at the open source case, or where cases whereby another organization also wants to implement the same thing. Then we've made mention of either we getting the source code to build our own solutions, or the API supporting extending it with different file types. That's going to be a different administration altogether. But in most cases, you may want to go with the open source code, unless the file, this API says add files that you don't want to attach, and that's a different use case all along. But it's just for you to know that that one too is possible. So as it stands now, we can see that it doesn't allow us to attach those files, and then the send button gets blocked. That's the reaction that has been built around the client app, which is very good. Alright, so now what we want to do now is that we want to add a file extension that is prohibited. So right now it's listed as only Java and .excel. Let's add another extension that's not allowed. That's prohibited. As it stands now, you can attach executable files because it's not listed as prohibited. So you can attach executable file. So if I attach git bash, which is an executable file, the server doesn't react. Now we want it to react. So we understood that we are working with the list. Because we are working with the list, we'll go to where we have our extensions, like new client app, where we have our extensions, and then workstation, yeah, workstation profile. Then we will add that for Excel. That's for that's for executable. So when we add that for executable, we realize that executable files are now going to be what? um, Illegal or prohibited files. So we are in our server, and then we've come to our server, and then we've made some update, or we've said that the server now doesn't support executable file, and then we've made those updates, we've applied those updates, and now the server doesn't support that. So if we come over here to our Swagger, realize that executable file has been listed as not supported, as prohibited, sorry, prohibited. So now if we go ahead and we try to uh, attach an executable file, you realize that it says unacceptable file, executable file. So based on business or security reasons, we've been able to make changes or to the server for the server to not allow us to send executable files over the real client. So it has been blocked, it has been prohibited. So that's the implementation that has been done at the back end of what we just saw. Now, if we go ahead and we also try to send files that are not supported, which we do so as JPEG files, we realize that it will tell you that JPEG file scanning server does not support extension JPEG. So this is a response that is actually showing the mail client, but we may not want that in the real world. We may want to handle it differently. But just for us to know that the file scanning server does not support extension.jpg. So we can't actually send a JPEG file to, because we can't scan it. So the send option 2 has been blocked. You can't go ahead and scan. Alright, so that's the demonstrations we're looking at for the file scanning server and how it works and how it scans for extensions. The actual technical nitty-gritties as to how this is working is listed will be listed in a different full film. We don't want to go too technically into that. First of all, we want to look at the demo, which we've just looked at. And with this understanding, we will dive deeper into the project structure and also the advanced use cases or the software engineering use cases. But before we go, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Right now, as it stands now, our file scanning server wants to send a file to Gmail, a Gmail user who sends hello. Now we go ahead and attach maybe only a single file. Let's attach a text file because text files have been flagged as prohibited. And then our send button is ready. If you realize that when we try to send a file, what will happen was that this file will not, we can't send this file. We have an issue. It says file not sent. And the reason is that the file scanning server is having an issue. Not the file scanning server, but the mail client app is having an issue. And the issue the mail client app is having is because it doesn't, the mail server that sends the file is throwing an exception. So as it stands now, the mail server is a Gmail server, but in the real world, we are not only going to be sending to Gmail users, we'll be sending to Yahoo users too as well. So if you want to send to a Yahoo, not just, we want to send to a Yahoo user, maybe John Doe, and add a subject of Yahoo, and then we try to attach a file, and let's close this, and we hit send. It will say file not sent. So we come and we check, it will tell you that there's an issue. It actually makes you know that the message is ready from the logs, but the file cannot send for reasons that are being used in the application. The reasons is that this mail server implementation we are working with does not allow us to send the file for reasons known to it. And those reasons is what we have to fix now because our file scanning server can scan the file, but our mail client app cannot send the file, which is a big issue. So to handle that, we have to actually go into our mail client app and see how we are going to fix that. So as it stands now, this is the mail server that we are using. So our use case here is we trying to send a mail via Gmail's mail server. So we are sending a file or an email via Gmail mail server, which means that it only understands Gmail users. But in the real world, we don't want to have only Gmail. We want to have an open mail server. So how do we go about fixing this problem in our source code? Because it has to be able to send to Gmail, it has to be able to send to Yahoo, it has to be able to send to Outlook, it has to be able to send to company domains. So how do we fix this issue? So this is where this advanced use cases will come inside, and so I read some solid principles like that list scope substitution, dependency inversion are all going to come inside. So I rebuild this solution. And that will be done in the next code film. So we want to do a migration or we want to solve sending only via Gmail. So what are the options that are there? Aside using the mail server, you realize that what will come into mind is that as if you're a developer, you can have an API mail server. So an API, a mail server API will help you to do that. So yeah, let's look at list of mail server API. So it gives you 50 best or find out what's best email API. So this is an email API. So this email API, the same way Gmail have built they have their own mail server and that they are using. These providers to also have their own mail servers they set up and they've given us APIs to those mail servers. So we want to be able to send files via these mail APIs instead of we just speaking to the mail server directly, which is Gmail's mail server. We want to speak to a gateway or a mail server gateway. That's going to help us to send those files. in our own infrastructure, we could have set up our own mail server, have our own mail server running here, and that mail server will actually exist on our premises. But as it stands now, we are looking for solution to this. So how are we going to fix this? And those are the cases we are looking at. Either we are going with an email API, which means that a company sitting somewhere has built a mail server, and that mail server, they've given us APIs to this mail server. So we're actually just going to be speaking to those APIs, and those mail servers which are on their infrastructure is going to be sending the mail for us. This is one use case. The other use case is actually rebuilding our own mail server API on our infrastructure to also do that, rather than relying on third parties who have done all the hard work for us and have just given us what simple APIs for what communication. So that's one way too. So either we're going with the API or we're going with the mail or having a mail server on our infrastructure. And we've explained that the API is just for communication. We are not actually going to enter into the source code. We don't have access to the implementations. We just have interfaces or endpoints to those to that network or that parameter. But we can actually enter and customize it to suit what we want. If we want to do the customization, then we have to actually go ahead and have our own email service or our own mail server. And setting up that one too will require us having it installed on our infrastructure, whereby we can actually go ahead and see that when you come over here to this um, company or this organization, we've built a mail server, and that mail server is what's going to help us to send all our mails. So you can just go ahead and then you build a VM out of that. So that VM will handle only sending of what mails. So you go, you click add or new, then go ahead, or you can clone one from an existing. Then when you clone, you rename it. You can make this our mail server. So we say Cool Films mail server. And when we clone it, it's going to create a mail server for us. So and when that one is done, we'll have our own mail server. So we'll look at how to go about that solution in our code film. So right now as programmers, we've seen that the file types are being checked, whether it's allowed or not allowed with the list implementation. So whatever we don't like, we just come and add it to what our list. So if we don't want to, if we don't want to allow JPEG, we go ahead and add it to JPEG. So JPEG will now be supported, but it's not legal. So if you check, realize that JPEG is now has now made is now going to be allowed. It's not going to be prohibited, even though it is now supported. So JPEG, if you refresh this, realize that JPEG is now supported, but it is what unfortunately it says prohibited. So if you scan it again, attach our file, and add the JPEG file, it says unacceptable file extension. Alright, so guys, that's it for this whole film. So our mail server is ready, and we go ahead and we set it up to send mails or not. Or we go ahead and use APIs to speak to the mail servers online that are provided by third party. Alright guys, so that's it for this core film, and this is just the beginning of our journey into what we want to do this year. So we've actually started, we've looked at the client and server relationship that has been established between um, our mail client app and our file scanning server. Our file scanning server is existing on our infrastructure with an in-memory database, but it's not allowed. It's not for everybody. If everybody wants to have access to it, then you have to look at the APIs, which means that they are riding on existing features, which is being administered by our organization. But if they want to go ahead and avoid the APIs and have full access to customization for their business needs, then you also look at the case of whereby you have to go with the open source approach, whereby you can just go and get the code, you include the code, and it can become yours, or you download the code, it can become yours for your organization, and you build your own solution. So that'll be it for this code. In the next code film, we'll see how we're going to fix the mail issue that we're encountering, because we can't send mails as it stands now after doing our attachment, and it's all coming from the mail server we're using, because this username and password is no longer what accept it. And you realize that if you are logging in with Gmail of late, let's see if I have Gmail. Let's try and go to Gmail from here. If you are logging to Gmail of late, you realize that it now supports 2FA. So to find the bypass around this 2FA implementation, we have to see how we are going to we are going to do that because Gmail now supports two-factor authentication. And then we sending it via the mail server, we can't, how are we going to permit two-factor authentication? So we say that it has sent a code to our phone. So we actually go and log into our phone and get and verify this. But with the client app, we can't do that. So there has to be a solution. If you don't want to go with the APIs, that we look at open APIs by mail servers that are actually handling all the complexity, or rebuilding our own mail server too that will handle the mail forwarding and the receiving of the mail. If we are not okay with that, because we are only using Gmail for now, what we do is that we actually go out to go and look for Gmail APIs for mails because the vanilla server is not helping us. And if you go ahead and check the Gmail API, to tell you something interesting, to tell you that the Gmail API is a RESTful API, sorry, that can be used to access Gmail mailboxes and send mail. For most web applications, the Gmail API, let's look at this very carefully, is the best choice for authorized access to a user's Gmail data and is suitable for various applications. So if you are going with a server approach and it's not working, then the Gmail API is what we have to go with. But that means we can only send mails. We can send mails to Yahoo service. Yeah, because it's Gmail handle all that complexity, but we don't want to rely only on Gmail. No, we want to kill that dependency. So we may want to go with a third party approach. So this is for accessing Gmail mailboxes and sending mail. So let's try and prevent all that and let's just see what other open services are available for us. So this is an email API for optional inbox placement and what have you. So it tells you what you can do, what you cannot do, and what's allowed and what is not allowed. Because the Gmail one, you have to actually send from a Gmail account. What if you don't have a Gmail account? We don't want to be restricted by the Gmail account. And if you go ahead and check the developer's guide for Gmail for this API complexity that they've built, you realize that it just needs two parameters, the to and the from. Where are you sending it from and where are you sending it to? But for a Gmail API, you have to actually send from a Gmail account, just as you log into your own Gmail platform and then you have to send a mail from your Gmail account. But if you don't want to go with that, you have to go with the open guys, the guys that have made it open for us so that they have the mail server sitting there and then we just speak to the API. The forwarding and the backtracking and everything that's going on is not our business. All we know is that this is what the API says. We obey the API delivers for us from and to. We don't care about anything else, what's happening. All we know is that we use the API worked, and we are okay with that. So this is the approach that we want to go with. But you can also look at the approach of that maybe later on, but we want to go with the API approach first. And also we can look at other ones as and when the interest pops up. Alright guys, so I've said so much in this code film, and I want us to take it one step at a time. So the next time we are coming back, we actually want to go with how we are using core implementations to handle what we want to do in our next code film. To wrap it up, all I'll just say is that JavaScript is being used here because this dynamic interaction whereby we can attach files and as you attach file, it's affecting the web page. It's all because of JavaScript. Because sometimes you can scroll, sometimes you cannot scroll. Sometimes the button gets deactivated, sometimes it's not deactivated. So that's just for us to know that JavaScript is taking place in the background or the language JavaScript is being used. So if you touch this now, realize that the scroll doesn't show, and that's the work of the JavaScript. So I think I've covered everything that needs to be covered in terms of what we promised at the beginning of the code film. The next code film is going to be the core implementations. And then when we look at the core implementation, we try to understand this project structure that is listed over here in terms of the folders, the layers that pertain to the implementation, the layers that pertain to the implementation. All right, guys, so that's it for this code film, and then I'll see you in the next code film. Bye.